Joining us on the Western Hotline to jump in on the discussion a bit is play-by-play voice of the Buffalo Bills, and, of course, you hear him on One Bills Live, Chris Brown, joining us on this Thursday morning. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, guys.
I want to start with a question for you on this draft. I asked Joe, how many jobs do the Bills have available, do you think?
Yeah, we've been kind of knocking this around on One Bills Live as well. You know, do we expect them to draft 10 players? Just a year removed from drafting 10 players. You know, so I think Beane's going to move around a little bit. Steve is convinced there is no way we're picking at 30. He doesn't know if we're moving up or down, but he says there's no way we're picking at 30. But actually, he took the time to look it up, and I think Brandon Beane only went stick and pick in round one once in his 7 drafts. So,
is that Rousseau?
I think it's Rousseau, yeah.
Yeah.
And Ed Oliver in the top 10.
Right.
So maybe it's twice. Steve's research might need a little work. Happy birthday to Steve today, by the way. Yeah, so he's a guy that we know likes to move around, not a person to sit on his hands during the draft. So, yeah, I think they're going to use some of that draft capital on day 3. You got 7 picks on day 3. Are you really using 7 on day 3? Probably not, right? So, you know, use that to parlay yourself into some higher positions in the draft. I think round 3 is sticking out like a sore thumb where the Bills do not have a pick, and I would be inclined to believe they're going to use some of that draft capital to get into round 3 because everyone we've talked to is of the same mindset that there is a noticeable drop-off after round 3 going to day 3. So I could see the Bills wanting to get up in that area somewhere at the end of day 2 and make a pick.
Yeah, 2 fourths and 3 fifths to do work there. Or, sorry, 2 fourths, 2 fifths, and 3 sixths. Yeah, well, they've got the ammo is I guess, the takeaway here.
Yes, absolutely. And I would expect them to move into round 3 before day 2 is done, especially if they haven't moved around prior to that. You know, whether it's a slide back in round 1 or whether, you know, they did something in round 2 to move up. So I would be inclined to think they make themselves participants in round 3, you know, if the first 2 rounds kind of go relatively quietly.
Yeah, and the move up idea, because they have all this ammo, it's tough though, right? Because if there's 2 parts of trading up in round 1, which Beane's done several times as well, which is are your day 3 picks going to be enough to move you very far in the first round? And also, what should they be shooting for? I mean, last year we talked a lot about them shooting up for a receiver if one of them fell, and there are corners available, but I don't know, Chris, because a lot of the guys we often talk about there are options, right? Like there isn't a giant drop-off, it seems, at either corner or D-tackle, maybe D-tackle a little more so. But that would be my question is, what are you moving up for, and why, I guess, would there be like a desperation to do it?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that come the early 20s, there could be a run on defensive tackles. So if there's one that you're absolutely in love with and the run starts, maybe you make a move at that point in time. I think we kind of calculated, and I realize the trade value charts vary in terms of the value that they put on each pick, but I think with your pick at 30 and 2 of your 5s, you can get up to 24 because it's only like 120 points, I think, difference. Or maybe it's a 4 and a 5. Forgive me for not remembering off the top of my head. So you can make a move about 5, 6 picks to do that if you wanted to, because I think you can make an argument from like 21 all the way down to about 28. There's about 7 teams that you can make an argument need defensive line help. So it wouldn't shock me if that's where the run starts there. And that could prompt, you know, Brandon Beane. If there's somebody he's absolutely got to have him type of player, you know, making a move like that. I don't know that you move up for a corner. I don't think there's going to be too many corners coming off the board in round 1 anyway. I think the Bills, if they just stick and pick at 30, I think they have a really good chance to get the 3rd or 4th best corner in the draft, which, you know, might not be a bad idea, knowing in terms of starter holes left to fill, you still need a CB2 here.
Yeah. You know, Chris, the pre-draft is extension time and free agency, and we saw the defense get a lot of attention. They extend Bernard, they extend Benford, they extend Rousseau, and then Ogunjobi and Michael Hoyt and Joey Bosa. I mean, I have an expectation this defense is going to have, if I even need to say, a bounce back year. They were good at certain things last year, but it kind of feels like the transition year we just talked about a lot. A lot of that was a defensive transition. Offense has its stable pieces, and they can really add, whether it's corner two or a defensive tackle. It feels like this defense will have high expectations going into the season.
Well, you'd like to think they're better equipped to be better against the run, have a better and more potent pass rush to affect quarterbacks on third down, where the Bills ranked 29th in the league in third down defense. They were middle of the pack in run defense, and I think they were 18th in sacks with just 37. So the pass rush needed an upgrade. They've addressed that to some extent with Joey Bosa and some of the other additions that you mentioned, and they need help on the back end to cover. You hear Coach McDermott say it all the time. The rush and the coverage work together. I think they have to do a better job of working together going forward, because it just did not match up well enough last season, and that's why they had trouble getting off the field unless they took the ball away. And they did an outstanding job at taking the ball away. It was the best thing that they did, because they finished second in total takeaways last year, and I think first or second in turnover margin. That's the only reason that the team went as far as they did, because they were taking the ball away. But you can't live and die off of that, because when that dries up and you don't have anything else left to stand on, your defense suddenly becomes very ordinary. So I think they recognize that. They've done what they've had to address it in free agency, and now I expect them to address it in the draft as well. I mean, let's just say they keep 7 picks, guys, out of the 10. I mean, we're kind of expecting at least 5 to be defense, right?
Yeah. Would you include, for those picks, are you of the belief that safety is on the table? Maybe if it's the right safety at 30, because there are some guys in the mix here, whether it's Emmanwori, people are in love with the idea of the athletic profile. We've seen some teams take a safety, kind of the chess piece, movable safety, and I wonder if you think the safety spot is kind of locked down, or if it is in the mix.
Yeah, I don't think it's locked down. I'm kind of expecting them to add one in the draft. Where in the draft, I think, is just going to be a matter of opportunity. I'm not expecting Emmanwori to be there at 30, because his physical skill set is too dynamic to argue to last that long. But who knows? Maybe some quarterbacks get pushed up, maybe some D tackles. There's a run on D tackles in the 20s, as I suggested, and maybe he does trickle down there. Yeah, you're going to have a long conversation about that, based on the profile, and not only that, the versatility of that kid. I mean, he could be a hybrid linebacker. He could play in a 3-safety nickel package if you wanted to do that, because he can cover as well. So the amount of things you can do with him, combined with the physical skill set, is what makes him so attractive. So, yeah, I mean, he would have to be a consideration just because of the profile and the amount of different things you could do with him. But if it doesn't happen in round 1, I wouldn't write it off. I think there's a very good chance that they look for safety depth. I mean, we have to remember, too, Hamlin's on a 1-year deal, Derek Forrest is on a 1-year deal, and Cam Lewis is in the last year of his contract. So you always have to, as a GM, not only plan for the here and now, but a year from now sometimes as well. So if it's a superstar like Emmanwori and he's on the board, yeah, you consider him early. Otherwise, I think it's a lesser consideration, sometime late on day 2, day 3 type of stuff.
Right. Might not feel like something you have to address, especially early on in the draft. You said, and I agree with this, that if they were to make 7 picks, 5 are defense? I mean, offensively, is it just kind of the speed receiver? They're having a lot of visits right now with speed receivers. They are more so guys, though, that are 3rd, 4th, 5th round caliber. There's nobody I've seen that they've brought in, unless Isaiah Bond goes way higher than he could in round 1 prospects. It's more middle of the round guys. That's kind of it, right? Even that second position, I'm sure they could grab a lineman or something on day 3 just to do it. But offensively, other than like one more receiver with a very specific skill set, Chris, do you see anything that you think the Bills will target?
Yeah, I mean, it has been guys that are clocking in the 4.3s that have been making some pre-draft visits. So, you can pick one of those guys up, late in the draft. I mean, I've actually been kind of combing through a bunch of those over the last week or so, and I'm like, oh, man, this guy runs 4.37. Oh, man, this guy runs 4.34. Now, there are nicks and chinks in the armor in terms of their complete profile, which is why they're considered day 3 selections. But, the Bills are doing their due diligence, and, if they have an extra pick in the 6th round, take a flyer on a guy. I think the other position and we talked about this a little bit yesterday on the show, that is kind of getting forgotten too, is the tight end spot from the standpoint of the 3rd tight end position. Quentin Morris is still out there in free agency, and yes, you have Zach Davidson, but he's kind of a one-trick pass catcher at the tight end position. So if you need a tight end to do some dirty work, I mean, that could be a consideration on day 3 as well, somewhere in that 5th to 6th round range.
Chris Brown joining us on the Western Hotline. Chris, as we talk about that speed at receiver, how do you see this whole thing mixing in? I mean, McDermott talked about how significant of a loss Mac Hollins was. And to me, the bigger story about Mac Hollins' departure, Palmer comes in, Cooper's still out there. I feel like they might have been a little bit surprised to lose Hollins and probably entered the offseason with the belief that they could get him back. And, he had such a good season. New England wanted to sign him and maybe give him a bigger role. So how do they fill that? Does it have to be a receiver? Could it be a defensive back? They see somebody in the role, because we are seeing, of course, special teams with the revamped kickoff back to more importance. And the later rounds could be spent on guys that you think are going to fill those kind of jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Laviska Shenault and Brandon Codrington are your 2 returners, so I think you're covered there on special teams. What you need is people to cover kicks, and guys that run 4.3 help you cover kicks. So I think that's part of it. And some of those guys, if you dig into their profiles, have special teams experience. There's one guy that I was looking at yesterday, I'm not going to remember his name now, but he had over 1,000 snaps on cover teams. That's going to be valuable in round 6, and that's probably going to get that kid drafted because that's where a team is going to stick him as a rookie, especially if they have, a receiving core that's pretty much, set from 1 through 4 or even 1 through 5. So, those are the kinds of guys that earn themselves opportunities because of their special teams experience, and I would expect the Bills to be looking for somebody like that, whether it's receiver, whether it's a defensive back, whether it's even a linebacker that can really run. I think they want to make sure that they're buttoned up on special teams under new special teams coordinator Chris Tabor. And, you need some guys with some kind of special teams experience coming in as rookies, especially if you have a hole or 2 there and they're going to have to be on the field.
Special teams, we brought up earlier, kicker. The Bills are having a kicker in for a visit tomorrow. And I just wonder, Bass had his struggles and got through those, but should we consider the idea that a kicker could be something they look at later in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, with Bean, you can't rule anything out. Sometimes I will say this, the Bills over the years on pre-draft visits really run the gamut, whether it's high-end players that maybe they didn't get enough meeting time with through the pre-draft process, or day 3 guys that they may have a question about and just want to cross some T's and dot some I's on and say, yeah, you know what? If this guy is available, in round 6, he's in our little candidate pool of who we would consider strongly there. And then they even, from time to time, have brought guys in on pre-draft visits that probably aren't going to get drafted, but they want to make a connection with that player by having them in, spending a day with them. So when the stock market starts at the end of the draft and you got 32 teams on phones trying to recruit undrafted players, making that connection with an undrafted player that they could see as a guy that's got a pathway perhaps to the roster in a year or 2. Oh, you know what? I spent the day with the Bills. I'm going to sign with those guys. I really liked what I heard from them. That's how fine the Bills and maybe a handful of other teams cut it with pre-draft visits. So that kicker coming in, they may not have any plans of drafting him, but maybe they're trying to make a connection with him to see if we get to undrafted rookies. Hey, come on in, come compete. Let's see what we can get you to do. It makes a difference sometimes.
Chris Brown with us on the Western Hotline. You guys yesterday spent a little time on like dark horse positions in the draft. Me and Jeremy have a bet what they'll draft earlier, running back or linebacker. I don't know if those came up yesterday, but what would you be more, put it this way, what would you be more stunned at? Them drafting, not round 1, but if they get their way to round 3 and do one of those positions, like which one would you be stunned at if they prioritized it?
I'm not stunned by anything Brandon Beane does anymore, but not trying to dodge the question. But, yeah, I mean, I guess you can't overlook the fact that, you got James Cook going into the last year of his contract as of right now. Does drafting a running back signal something, and do you want that drama? I don't know that he cares. But linebacker, I really kind of like their depth there. You could always use another one, and we know Milano's going to be a free agent after this year, after renegotiating his deal. I don't know that either would shock me because I think I can find a way to explain the pick position-wise. So I don't know if either one of those would shock me. I think an offensive tackle would shock me because they have 4 right now.
Yeah,
right. Do you feel like linebacker 2 might be what they think of Dorian Williams long term? Like he was good but not perfect last year when he played in place of Milano. And if Milano if he's going into his last year as a Buffalo Bill, then you have a guy that was a 3rd-round pick that's a great athlete. But I don't know. It might be a question for Beane or McDermott of how much they think he can grow in the rest of his game to become like a full-time starter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you and I are on different pages, but I really liked what Dorian Williams did. He wasn't great at the start of the year, but, man, he really came along. And it's hard not to notice him because he is everywhere all the time. It wouldn't shock me, if he – by the second half of the season is starting, something like that. I see him really pushing Milano this year. That may be blasphemous to say because I know everybody loves Milano, and I do too. But he is so athletic. I mean, think about this, guys. He started 9 games last year, and then Milano comes back. At the end of the year, Dorian Williams was still the team's leading tackler. Like, it wasn't even, you know what I mean? And I mean, they played a little base defense, but not that much. And the guy's the team's leading tackler starting 9 games. I mean, you don't see that very often. I think it's just an indication of what a playmaker he is. So, I respectfully, I think he had a pretty damn good season last year, and I don't think they're worried about him if he has to step into the starting lineup again this year at all.
Chris Brown, the Western Hotline. Chris, thanks for the time, and we'll be listening today coming up on One Bills Live.
All right, take care, fellas.
All right.